Transnet National Ports Authority and Transnet's port terminals, as we now know them, came into being in 2002 when Portnet restructured ostensibly to improve efficiencies and service delivery within South Africa's port sector. Ahead of this split, in March 2001, Siyabonga Gama told the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises that the National Ports Authority's vision was to be a transformed, self-efficient port authority that facilitates and enables competitiveness in a world-class port system, to facilitate economic growth in South Africa by providing and sustaining port systems that are amongst the best in the world. The National Ports Act was published in 2005, providing for the establishment of the National Ports Authority and the Ports Regulator. It should be noted that the Act calls for the removal of the National Ports Authority from Transnet and the establishment of a separate Pty Limited company into which the relevant Transnet assets are transferred. This corporatization of the authority has yet to be finalized, and we are now sitting in 2024. Nevertheless, if Siyabonga Gama's vision and the Ports Act are to be believed, we would not be having a discussion on the impact of port congestion in South African ports. Our Ports Act calls on the authority to plan, provide, maintain, and improve port infrastructure. In fact, the language of the Ports Act makes it very hard for the authority to point a finger elsewhere to assign blame for any port inefficiencies, as it describes the functions as pretty much all-encompassing. When we complain about traffic congestion within the ports, we need to remember that the Ports Act stipulates that the authority must provide or arrange for road and rail access within the ports. When we complain about vessel waiting times, we should note the Act's stipulation that the authority regulate and control navigation within port limits and the approaches to ports, the entry of vessels into ports, and their stay, movements, or operations in and departure from ports. When we complain that there are not enough pilots or tugs to assist vessels entering and leaving the port, we need to understand that this function rests firmly on the shoulders of the Ports Authority, and that they must arrange for tugs, pilot boats, and other facilities for the navigation and berthing of vessels in ports. When we complain about the cargo loading and unloading inefficiencies, we are reminded that the authority must ensure that any entity rendering any port services or port facilities is able to provide these services and facilities efficiently. In fact, the Port Act states that the authority is tasked to promote efficiency, reliability, and economy on the part of licensed operators in accordance with recognized international standards as well as public demand. The Ports Act imposes the very real need to promote the use, improvement, and development of ports as a function of the National Ports Authority, and it gives the authority the necessary powers to achieve this. The authority may undertake any other activities within a port that encourage and facilitate the development of trade and commerce for the economic benefit and interest of the national economy. The authority, as an operator of last resort, must do everything reasonably necessary for the effective and economic management, planning, control, and operation of ports. The authority must in all its activities aim to conduct business in a manner designed to achieve the objects of this Act, and which does not jeopardize the national interest. There is, of course, a lot more to the Act, but let's be clear. Transnet National Ports Authority, which should by now be operating as the National Ports Authority separate from Transnet, has not delivered on either its founding mission or on the requirements of the National Ports Act. Over the ensuing years, we have been fed a number of wonderfully crafted strategies aimed at making us believe that the problems in our ports are being addressed. These include the 4-point turnaround plan, the market demand strategy, and Operation Pakisa as it related to the ports. Most recently, the President established the National Logistics Crisis Committee to pursue port reform and open the space for more private sector involvement. But still, we have the same conversations that we've been having for more than 2 decades. Given the strategic importance of ports, we need to understand that the impact is one that is felt far beyond the community of direct port users. And even though the majority of South Africans are unaware that close to 90% of our trade is transported via the sea, they need to know that another SOE's underperformance is as much a threat to our economy as load shedding is. When a ship bypasses a port and offloads cargo elsewhere, who pays for the additional land haulage costs? When a ship adds a port congestion surcharge to cargo, who feels the pinch in their wallet? When exporters face cancelled orders due to reputational damage caused by sea freight delays, who will notice a decline in revenue growth? When trucks wait for hours at the port to offload or load containers, who bears the cost of additional man-hours or overtime? When stock does not arrive in time for scheduled sales, promotions, or to meet other contractual requirements, who faces the music? And what happens when the inland corridors make it simply easier for ships to use Walvis Bay and Maputo at the expense of some of our ports? We have already seen some port traffic and services opting out of South Africa, and our ports can get away with the inefficiencies because there really is no other option for trade to enter or leave the country. It's the average South African that is impacted, the South African who understands that they are impacted by Eskom's inefficiencies, by SAA's bailouts, and by SABC's loans, but blames the cost of living on the spectre of inflation or merchandisers or retailers. Our conversation on port reform needs to become louder. We cannot allow the port operators and authority to congratulate themselves for marginal gains or for doing what they are mandated to do. We cannot applaud an increase in container moves this month when it compares unfavorably to statistics achieved historically. We should be asking for a live dashboard that allows transparencies of promised capex spend over decades rather than annual terms. It's easy to forget that we were promised assets and gains 10 years ago that are still not being delivered when we are fed tidbits of information that is cosmetically enhanced in an annual report. It's time to put together one report that provides a data set devoid of jargon and strips down the problems